counsel and defendant are present. Mr. Myers.
Yes, Your Honor. One break. Given the case the Supreme Court that was decided today, I don't know if Your Honor had a chance to debrief on the
No.
I haven't read it either. It's 50+ pages. But it's State of Florida versus Mark Poole. It's a death penalty case. Talking about the need for a unanimous death verdict. And I've got a copy. I'll give them a copy to the defense. I've got a copy for Your Honor. But it's something we're going to need to educate ourselves on and come up to speed.
What is your impression of what's new about it, if anything?
It proceeds from Hearst. It says we agree with the state that we must proceed from Hearst v. State, except to the extent that it held that a jury must unanimously find the existence of a statutory aggravating circumstance beyond a reasonable doubt. So then it doesn't have to be a 12-0 vote.
On the aggravating fact?
No, on the whole thing. That's what Hearst said.
I thought the statute had provided that.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll have a lot to talk about.
Well,
Yes. Today. John handed it to me as I'm walking up.
isn't he efficient?
Yeah.
You haven't read it.
All right, anything to address before we bring the jury in?
Yes, sir.
We want to get, we were in the middle of the video, that's right. Okay, let's bring the jury in, please.
Yes, sir.
My understanding, some of the jurors have asked for clipboard, something to make it easier to write on, and we're doing our best to find those for you. All right, we're going to start the video back up.
I wouldn't hurt nothing. I would never hurt an animal.
Well, what's ironic about all this is that's the same way your family was killed.
That's the same way my family was killed. So they were shot in the head, right?
No,
How were they killed?
I just explained it to you.
Tell me again, please. They were what?
Why don't you tell me what you did to them?
I didn't do anything to my family.
Yeah, you did. I We're not gonna go through that again. You did, okay?
Yes, sir.
I've been over to the house, I've looked at everything. You went over there and you killed your mother and you killed your brother and you waited and RT got home and you killed him. Okay?
Yes.
And you killed them all the same night. Stab them.
Stabbing, they were stabbed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. I thought you said they were shot in the head.
I did tell you that last time.
I don't do animal sacrifices, and I sure would sacrifice my family if you think Wicca's got something to do with this. Your way out there, I would never hurt anything. Never. And I sure wouldn't.
Have you been in your right frame of mind lately?
Yeah. I've been in my right frame of mind lately. I can't, I mean, as far as I know, I have. I mean, I do the same thing I always do. I haven't done anything really different.
So don't you think it's pretty much a coincidence that you're a Wiccan and your family's killed like a Wiccan sacrifice?
I don't know anything about Wiccan sacrifices. I don't know a thing about anything like that.
If you know about the blue moon and all that kind of stuff, you do.
Well, I know about the blue moon. I know it's two full moons, but I mean, it's been all over the radio.
I never hear it on the radio. I listen to the radio every day, all day. Have you ever heard about that on the radio? I just remember listening to
Yeah, it's been on the radio. The only thing I listen to is Talk Church. That's the main thing I listen to. And the only time I listen to them is when I'm at work.
Were you mad at your mom?
No, why would I be mad at my mother?
Well, you'd have to be to smack her in the head and cut her, stab her.
Smack her in the head.
Yeah,
I thought you said that they stabbed her.
they did.
And they hit her in the head?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this.
Let me ask you this, what would somebody gain to go to, why single out your mom and two brothers? What for, you know what I'm saying? Why would somebody go there to that house and go in there just for some random thing and kill everybody inside?
I don't know why anybody would do something like that.
You know what? When I come in here and talk to you, because I've never met you, Donald.
That's right.
And I've seen you, but, you know, your behavior is extremely odd for somebody that's just lost their entire family. I mean, you don't seem very emotional about it, like, you know, I mean, you're very just matter of fact, not upset, and that just may be the way you are, but I just find it very odd. You know, and you know, the technological age that we live in, okay? So when I said earlier that you went over there to cook dinner, you got over there about what time? 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock,
Okay.
1:30. I know I started cooking dinner about 2:30.
Okay. Did y'all eat together at the table?
No, Mama always eats in her chair.
Okay. Where did you eat at?
I eat at the table with John.
Okay.
John sits on the end, and I sit right there between the bar and the table.
And when y'all got done, cleaned up?
Yeah, when we always clean up when we get done.
Okay. Take the dishes away?
Yeah, we'll stick them in the dishwasher.
What time do you think you left?
Well, I mean, I didn't leave right then. I was there for a while. I'd say I probably left maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock. And you asked me a question earlier about what I was watching on TV, and I just turned the TV on. I really wasn't paying attention to it, but it was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
I'll see about 5:30, 6 o'clock.
And I really wasn't paying attention to it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You left, did you go straight home, or did you go somewhere else, friend's house, or anything like that?
I went straight home.
Okay, you went straight home to your house.
I always go straight home.
Okay, you sat there for the rest of the night.
Yes, sir. I went home, And I went to the mailbox with Ina, walked her around, well, I did take her for a couple of walks that afternoon.
You have a cell phone?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Like I was saying earlier, you know that we're able to track cell phones.
Okay.
Okay. And you know when we pull your cell phone, you know what we're gonna find, right?
Yeah, you're gonna find out whatever I've done. And, I mean, I haven't got anything on my cell phone. I only do.
The only thing,
I called my son tonight and that's it.
we want to know what happened. That's it. Because once we get to the point of no return, we're trying to give you the opportunity to tell us what happened. If something bad did happen,
Nothing.
what happened?
I love my mother.
Okay. When we go and pull GPS coordinates from your phone, we can tell where you were at. We can tell that you were over there still at your mom's house past 7 o'clock when RT got home. Because RT's still wearing the same clothes that he was wearing when he got home from work Tuesday night. We know that he clocked out at 6:38. We know that he takes 20 to 30 minutes to drive home to get home. Okay, so that's gonna put him at home around 7 o'clock, 7:15. Right? And then we're gonna be able to see that Donald is still at mom's house and not at his house. You see where I'm going with it?
I don't think you are.
I know we are. And there's no other person that's just gonna go up to the house
Except for some crazy maniac.
and for what? And clean up? Why do they clean up?
Who knows?
And you know all about touch DNA and all that stuff. I'm sure you watch TV.
I know a little bit, yeah, I do watch TV, but I don't know too much
The
about
stuff that we
DNA.
recovered is gonna have Donald's fingerprints on it. It's gonna have Donald's DNA sweat, just like when I hold this phone, it's gonna be on there. All stuff that you normally do not touch, it's stuff that you can't explain, is what I'm telling you. And we know that, everybody knows that. The only question is,
There's not gonna be anything over there with any sweat off of me on it. I can tell you that, but the only thing that you'll find over there that might have sweat off of me is the cloths that I use when I wipe my face, and that's when I'm cooking. 'Cause that's the only sweat that I do is when I'm cooking, when it's hot. That's it.
you know,
Well, I mean, I go outside, mess, and I
we
sweat.
were talking about helping John wash clothes and stuff like that.
Well, when I said I helped him wash clothes, John washes the clothes.
Yeah.
I help him put them away.
The stuff is still in the dryer, in the washer.
Is it?
Yeah. It's 3 hand towels.
Well, yeah, but he probably, when Mom gets something from QVC, she puts it in the washer right then.
It's 3 hand towels, it's old hand towels.
Is that right? Well, I mean, it could have been stuff that he had left on the machine when I got there too. You know,
Or something that you need to clean up.
that I used to clean up. I didn't use anything to clean up. I did not use anything to clean up. I don't know. I have no idea what's going on here. I do not know.
You know exactly what's going on.
No, I know what's happened.
Exactly. You do know what's happening. Because you were there when it happened.
No, sir, I was not.
Have you ever used your mom's card to buy groceries or anything? You ever buy groceries for her?
No.
Credit card, who's she bank with?
I'm not sure who she banks with.
Who you bank with?
I bank with Bank of America. I've been with Bank of America for years.
Who got you the account in Bank of America?
I did.
Your mom didn't start one for you there or anything like that?
Uh-uh.
Okay.
And she might have started one there for John
Why would she have done
to help him.
that? How'd you feel about
And she might, I mean, RT, I don't know where his bank account, I don't even know what John's bank account is.
How did you feel about John and RT living at home with your mom?
John and RT have always been at home.
Why didn't you live at home with them?
So when I came down here, when I came back down here, you know, my father was still alive and there wasn't any room in that house for me. And Mom helped me find that place that I'm living in now.
And you've lived there for 15 years, you said?
Yes, sir. About 15 years, almost 15 years.
What do you think of?
What do I think of? I think my mom and my brothers were murdered by somebody.
What kind of person do you think it takes to do something like that?
A maniac. Somebody that's out of their mind crazy. You said that they stabbed them to death. That's a crazy person. That's an insane person.
It seems you shot them. You just, I'll tell you about the whole family was murdered. I would be so looking more emotional than you did.
In time. I've shown plenty of emotion. Believe me, I've already showed some emotion.
So,
Well, not to many people, but I've got my way of handling things.
how do you handle things?
I'll hold it inside. I don't want it.
Were there things going on in your family and you've held it in for so long? Then finally you had enough?
There was
Not angry?
nothing going on in my family. Nothing at all.
You killed your mom
I did not kill my mother.
and then killed your brother?
I wasn't free to kill my mom or my brother. Either one of my brothers. I mean, do I look like some kind of a blooming maniac to you people?
I mean, you do me. Let me explain something to you. Your mother was sitting in her chair, okay, when she was killed. So whoever killed her, she was comfortable being around, okay? Otherwise, she would have probably gotten up, moved, there would have been a sign of a struggle there, or something like that, okay?
As well as John also, because John doesn't talk to people, keeps to himself.
Yeah,
But he was killed sitting in his chair.
sitting in his chair.
Mm-hmm.
Had his throat cut.
Throat cut.
Mm-hmm.
And mom too.
Mm-hmm.
My God, that would take a monster. I'm the monster. I did not do this, y'all. I did not do this. I did not kill my mother in some kind of wicked ritual or whatever. The wicked that I know, it doesn't involve anything like that.
Let me ask you this, what, you sit there and say that you think a monster would do this at the house.
I think a monster would do this.
Well, what kind of monster would clean up after and try to conceal it?
That would be clean up and try to conceal it. That would be crazy. That would be absolutely crazy.
And then somebody's gonna put all these blankets and stuff on.
Blankets.
Like I was explaining to you about the witching ritual, they put cover them to keep them warm after they kill them.
I don't know nothing about no ritual like that.
I mean, who does that?
A crazy person does that.
Let me ask you this.
if somebody did this that didn't know your family, why would they just sit there, your mother and your brother John, and just let somebody kill you? Why would they do that? Makes no sense. Doesn't it?
I agree.
Okay? They had to be totally comfortable with whoever was in the house.
I guess they did.
No, they had to have been.
Well, I mean,
Otherwise, they would be
were.
sitting there and let somebody bash them in the fucking head. Okay? They had to be totally comfortable with whoever was in the house. Neighbors say nobody comes and goes over there. The only person they ever see come and go over there is you.
You were there about.
You were over there Tuesday,
Yes.
like he told you earlier. Your brother was killed in the clothes that he wore at work Tuesday. Okay? Nobody has seen these people since Tuesday, since you saw them.
I just want to see them alive.
So how are you going to sit there and tell us that you didn't kill them when you were the last one to see them? They trusted you, and you killed them. They didn't think anything of it. They didn't know it was coming.
I love my parents.
I'm sure you did.
I
But
love
you
my
killed
mom
them.
and my brothers, and I did not kill them. I did not kill them. I would never harm my mother, never hurt my brothers, never.
You might have thought you were doing it for the right reasons, for a whipping or whatever.
No, it's got nothing to do. I mean, the wicked that I
In your
did,
mind, you may not think you
that.
killed them. You may think you just sacrificed them.
I did not. I don't sacrifice anything. I have never sacrificed anything in my entire life. Ever. I've never killed. I would not hurt. I would hurt anything.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Did you touch any of RT's belongings?
RT's belongings.
Like personal belongings, his cell phone, anything like that? Did you touch any of that?
I don't even know where that is. I don't know where it's in the house at.
How do you know it's in the house?
Well, I mean, if it's in the house, I didn't touch it.
Okay.
No matter where it was, I didn't touch it. I mean, I don't mess with nothing of RT. RT's computer and all that stuff, I don't mess with none of that stuff.
What does he do?
He works for Homeland Security. Something to do with computers. That's what he does. That's all I know. He don't talk about his gun. I would say about 20 years. About as long as John has been at Walmart.
Department of Homeland Security?
Yes.
He made a lot of money.
I would imagine he probably does. He's a civil service worker. And he's been there 20 years. But I would imagine he makes plenty of money.
He's never loaned any money or anything like that.
RT? Yeah, he's loaned me money before. You know, I'm trying to remember when it was that he loaned it to me. I know one year he gave me money for Christmas.
He gets out and gets her own money with why does he need to?
Well, it could have been when I was in between jobs.
How long have you been, what's your current job?
I've been at my current job 10 years. It'll be 10 years soon.
And who's that with?
Safe Mark,
Security?
G4S Security. Yes.
Let me see your hands. Sleeping with your hands? So you said you'd never touched anything of RT's before?
Not that, not the RT wasn't there. Now, he's helped me before with my computer stuff.
With your computer stuff?
Yeah, when I have to do these classes and stuff that were required to take at work, a lot of times RT will help me take, he'll bring it up and help me get it going for me, then all I have to do is answer the questions, because I'm not too great at computer.
That's on a computer though, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with the cell phone, right?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with the cell phone. I haven't touched a cell phone.
Donald, what's gonna happen when we were able to say that you were at the house at 7:30 when your brother got home?
You're not going to be able to say that
Well,
because it's not true. I left that house. I was home before the news ended. So I turned the TV on, the news was on. And then after the news, Who Wants a Millionaire came on. I didn't pay no attention to it, but I do remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire came on. I was home before the news ended, the local news. And that's what time I always go home, just about that time.
Let me ask you this. Did you move any furniture or anything while you were over there Tuesday?
No, sir. I didn't move any furniture.
Move any rugs or anything?
No, sir.
clothes,
No,
nothing?
no,
Drag your mom down the hall?
no, sir. Drag my mom down the hall.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Was she in her chair?
Sorry, Miss Smith.
No, sir. I didn't drag my mom down the hall. I did not harm my family, not my brothers, or my mother. And I know this looking stuff to y'all must look real out there.
Yeah.
But I swear to you, I have never, ever sacrificed anything in my life. Ever. I would never harm an animal or cut a chicken's neck or anything like that. I don't know where y'all got that information from, but that ain't the kind of wicked that I know.
Who knows that you're wicked?
Nobody, I'm a solitary practitioner. Nobody knows that I'm a wicked.
No. Know anybody else? Let me ask this, do you know anybody else that's wicked?
No, sir. I don't know, I'm a solitary, what they call a solitary practitioner. I don't know anybody else that's a wicked. I'm not a member of a coven or anything like that. I don't have nothing to do with anything like that.
Are there such thing as wicked groups in this area?
There is, I don't know about. I mean, I'm not saying there's not. We just don't exactly go around advertising. So, I wouldn't even know how to go about finding out if there was a wicked group in this area.
Let me ask you this, what is, John's social life? Does he have a social life? Is he interested in women or men, or what is he like? Is he like men or women?
I would say like women. I mean, there's been a couple of girls that come to the house.
When you've been there?
Not when I've been there, I'm telling you about.
What about RT?
I don't know anything about RT's love life at all. I don't even know if he has one. As far as I know, he's not, he's normal. I mean, as far as I know.
What do you mean by normal?
I think he would like girls more than boys.
What about you?
I have no life when it comes to that. But I like girls. I don't like boys. I mean, I was married.
That was in the past, then, right?
18 years I was married. Yes, sir. I got a son.
You're local?
No, sir, he's in Virginia Beach.
What's he?
He works for Geico. Last I talked to him, It's been a while.
You said you talked to him,
No, I called him. He ain't called me back yet. 9 times out of 10 when he does, he'll be drunk. He don't never call me until he gets loaded, then he calls. I don't think so.
Where's his mom?
She lives right there. He lives in Virginia Beach, and she lives, well, I don't know where she lives, but I think she lives either Chesapeake or Moyon.
Is that where you?
That was years and years ago. When I left there, she was living in Moyon then, so I'm figuring her folks and all her families in Chesapeake. So Moyon's right there on the border of Chesapeake, so.
Does anybody else do? Stop by, see your mom, any other family members?
We don't have any other family in this area. The nearest family that we have in this area is in Mobile. And I got a slew of cousins in Mobile. And the only time they ever come over here to talk to mom is when they want to borrow money. And so she just don't have nothing to do with it.
Who would come over here from Mobile if they did come?
See one of my cousins, my aunt, is going over there. She's the only good one that mama has left, and she's, the last I heard, she's like an invalid.
What's her name?
Nell Watson.
And how do you spell that? N-E-L-L?
Yes.
How old is now?
Nell,
You know where she lives or anything?
I don't know where she lives, but she's about 10 years older than mom. She's about 9 or 10 years older than mom.
Why would the cousins come over here trying to get money from your mom?
They help pay the bills. They have a lot of financial problems, a lot of struggling over there, and mom will give them money. And I mean, when my cousin Carl died, she paid for the funeral. And that was the last time that I was over there, was when Carl died.
How long ago was that?
Before Daddy died.
4 years ago?
Maybe about 4 years ago, yeah, it was about 2 years, a year and a half before Daddy passed.
Were you at the house there when they went in the house? That,
Last time?
yeah.
Yes, sir, I was there.
Okay. How can you explain no forced entry into the house? Both your brother and your mom are killed while they're sitting down as if they knew who was in the house.
How can you explain that, sir? How can I explain that?
Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that they knew who it was that killed them. And usually when it's something like this, when it's covered up, it's usually that the person doesn't want to look at their family member that they killed because they have some kind of heart deep down and they cover them up because they're ashamed of what they
You
did.
mentioned that to me earlier. But I ain't had nothing to do with
There's
it.
no local family that lives here.
None.
Because if this was just some crackhead off the street, they go in there and kill them, run us through their shit, run out the fucking door. They wouldn't clean up. They wouldn't cover your mom and your brothers up. Anything like that points to a family member. Really, it points to you, Donald, pretty
I know it
much.
does, I know it does, and that's why I'm here. I know it points to me, but I did not kill my family, okay? And I had no idea who did. I had absolutely no idea. I don't know of anybody that they know that they would have trusted that much. I don't know of any other than family.
That's the whole thing, though, is like, you live locally, you live right down the street, but you have no connection with your family hardly. You see your mom once a week, you don't hardly talk to her on the phone, you don't know shit about
I'm sure a little
RT.
bit more than that. I mean, I'm over there for all the holidays and stuff like that. We all, the family get together for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and we all work. And we work all the time. John gets one holiday a year. You know?
Sounds like he's a hard worker.
Yeah, I mean, he gets Christmas off because he works at Walmart, but now he takes leave and all. So he's always off around the holidays. We always get together, and sometimes, you know, I don't get there till late.
How come you didn't move in with your mom after your dad died?
Well, Mama never asked me to move in with her.
Did you ever ask her if you moved in?
No,
Why not?
I like my house.
Like solitude?
I like my solitude and I like my house.
Does it seem like mom loved your half brother as much as she loved you?
No, never. It never seemed
I
like
mean,
my
it's
mom
odd.
loved my brothers more
To
than
me,
she loved me.
there's
She
all
loved all of
the
us.
QVC shit. It's like all in their rooms. Like she buys them stuff all the time. Does she give you any of that stuff?
She buys me stuff. She gets me stuff from QVC.
Would you be surprised if I told you that she spent $6,000 last month on QVC?
I'm too shocked. No idea Mom would spend money like that.
Would you be mad that your inheritance has been blown on QVC?
Hell no, I don't give a damn about no inheritance.
Does mom have an insurance policy?
I don't know. I don't know.
Does mom have a will?
I think she has a will. I think after Daddy died, she made a will. But I've never seen it.
Do you know what you're entitled to in that will?
I have no idea what I'm entitled to in any will. And I had no idea Mom spent $6,000 on QVC. I mean, I knew she was buying stuff, but I thought it was just a little, you know, like a shirt here and a pair of pants there, and a trinket here and a trinket there.
And you realize on something, case like this, the insurance company calls the sheriff's office and wants to know if you're a suspect.
I would imagine they probably would. I mean,
You know, in an instance like this, it's basically that we can't clear you at this moment of this homicide, and they're not gonna pay you.
I don't give a damn whether they pay me ever or not. I don't care. I am not worried about no. I don't even know if Mama's even got a life insurance policy. If she has, she ain't never told me about it. So you're insinuating that I showed my family to get their life insurance policy?
I had no idea. You just,
Do I look like a total maniac to you people?
Yeah. The way you're acting, yeah.
yes.
I didn't know that Mama had a life insurance. I didn't know that she had a life insurance policy or not, but I would imagine maybe she did. You know, I mean, it's what you're saying. Oh, I'm sorry. I know she had a life insurance policy on me and John and RT through Prudential. It was a small life insurance policy on us to bury us with if anything ever happened to us. But other than that, I couldn't tell you the name of any insurance company or anything like that because I don't know it.
How much was that life insurance policy?
Well, mine was a whole life insurance policy, and it was about $3,000, $3,000 or $4,000. I cashed mine out.
You did?
Yeah. And I can't remember what I got, but I think it was, well, $2,400, $20,000. If I had kept it, it would have been worth like $4,000 or something like that.
So the insurance policy was something for like $3,000 or $4,000?
Yeah, for the Prudential. Mama had it on me from the time I was a baby.
Now, are you cold-blooded killer?
Simple. So I'm not a cold-blooded killer. I'm not a cold-blooded person.
You know, remember when I talked to you about your dog earlier today?
Yes. Yeah.
You showed emotional when we talked about your dog. How if somebody killed your dog, cut your dog's throat, let it lay there and just bleed all over the place, flail around, struggle for its last breath.
Yeah, I'd be horrified. I would be horrified. I love my dog.
Well, I mean, what goes through your mind when you think about that? Imagine your mom.
I don't know what goes through my mind when I think about that. It's just terrible.
Think about your mom doing the same thing.
I don't want to think about my mom doing that. I don't want to think about anybody hurt my dog or my mom.
Somebody cut her throat. She sat there and suffered and bled all over the place. Somebody, like you,
Not me.
treated her like a piece of garbage, just drug her down the hall into a room, threw her clothes on top of her and left her like a piece of garbage.
I'd never do that to my mother. Never.
Then you did the same thing to your brothers. Cut their throat.
I would never harm my family. Never. Never.
Can you imagine what they went through?
I don't want to imagine what they went through. I don't want to imagine what they went through.
Well, that's what they went through.
And why? For what?
Exactly. It was done by somebody they knew and trusted.
It wasn't me, sir. I can tell you that. I never hurt my mother. Never. I just don't understand how this happened. I don't understand why this happened.
Well, if you didn't do it, I wish you could help me understand why it did happen.
As far as I'm concerned, me and my mom and my brothers, we were close. Now, like I said, we all worked just about all the time, except for Mama. And we saw each other when we could. I mean, you know, I'm working 3 to 11 every night. John's working all day. He's riding with RT. So, I mean, there's just not a whole lot of time in there to spend a whole lot of time together. We just all worked all the time. Go to work, come home. Go to work, come home. That's all we did. That's all anybody did that I know of.
Did you drag your mom down the hallway? Did you try and move either one of your brothers after they were killed?
No.
Did you try and clean up anything in that house?
No, sir. I was not there. I don't know anything about anything being cleaned up.
When was the last time you were at that house since Tuesday?
The Tuesday before.
No. Have you been there since this past Tuesday?
No, sir. The only time I was there was when we went over there when the sheriff's ever come got me this morning.
Okay. Are we gonna find anything in your car from that house?
I don't think so. I ain't got nothing in my car from that house. There ain't nothing in my car from that house. In fact, there ain't nothing in my car hardly, except for a bunch over the school and pair of sunshades, maybe. Is there anything else that I can answer for you?
Why'd you kill him?
I didn't feel my family, sir. I would never hurt my mother.
What this here is, this is seized property receiving pay. Just letting you know that we seized your maintaining one Lincoln Town car.
I don't want you to see my car. You didn't have to do that.
Well, we had to see this and we search it and process it, okay?
Oh, okay. That's fine then.
What this is a form who we seized it from
Yeah.
your house,
Well, when will I get it back?
when we're done searching it.
Because it's the only car I got. I've had that car for 10 years.
Would sign right there for me. I'll give you a copy of it.
Why could y'all just search it where it was?
Because we have to do a crime scene to do it.
Oh,
Here's your copy, okay?
yes, sir.
Give me a second, I'll be right back, okay? Just one more thing, just raise your right hand for me. You swear in front of the statement you made here that is the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir, I do.
All right.
Did you give Mr. Hartung a ride home after that, since you seized his car?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Now, during the first and second interviews, you had Mr. Hartung draw diagrams of the house. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
To get a layout of the house and figure out whose rooms belong to who, where people hung out in the house.
Judge, Mr. Griffith does not object to the introduction of State's Exhibit 365, which is just the diagram that Mr. Hartung was drawing with Investigator Infinger.
So admitted.
Now, at the end of this second interview, you told him that his car was seized, correct?
Correct.
And what kind of car did he drive?
1989 Lincoln Town Car.
And did crime scene take photographs of the car?
They did.
Were you present?
Yes.
And was it processed like
Yeah.
crime scene normally does?
Yes, it was.
Judge, we have no objection to the introduction of that photograph.
So Judge, for the record, it's 366 through 369.
So admitted.
And may I publish?
May.
This is State's 366. Will you just describe for the jurors in the record what this shows?
This is Donald Hartung's 1989 Lincoln Town Car at the Sheriff's Office.
367,
Same thing.
368,
This is the inside of the vehicle
and 369.
and the back seat of the vehicle.
Anything relevant found inside the car?
No.
And what was the condition as you saw it?
It was a very clean car.
Were the keys to Richard's white Toyota Highlander ever found?
No.
And there were some photos that the jurors saw earlier where crime scene was actually in the white Toyota Highlander. So how did you guys get in it?
We had to have a locksmith come out and unlock it.
Was Richard's wallet ever found?
No.
Now the jurors have seen a demonstrative aid of Deerfield Drive, but for the record, can you just describe the neighborhood, the shape, size?
To get into the neighborhood, you turn off a Klondike Road onto Deerfield Drive. It's a long road that goes in, one way out, and the subdivision is a long rectangle.
Now, you said Klondike. Is that the same street where Mr. Hartung lived?
It is.
And do you know how close or how far he lived from his family's home?
A little over 2 miles, maybe. Around 2 miles.
Was the Deerfield Drive neighborhood searched for video surveillance?
Yes, it was.
And did any of the neighbors have any kind of video equipment?
No, they did not.
Was Klondike Road searched for video equipment?
Yes, it
And
was.
did anyone on Klondike near Mr. Hartung's house have video surveillance?
No one on Klondike Road had any that we could find or locate.
There was testimony earlier that some FPS agents took 24 electronic items and then had them analyzed and forensically examined. Were receipts or records kept for those items?
Those items were logged in our evidence and then checked out, and they had to sign a property receipt for those items when they took them.
Okay.
So there was a chain of custody.
So none of these items were just taken by FPS from the Deerfield Drive home?
No.
Okay. Did Mr. Hartung have a cell phone?
Yes, he did.
And did you seize his cell phone?
We did.
Was any information obtained from it?
No.
Why not?
It was unable to be downloaded due to the operating system of the phone.
Okay, can you speak
It was
up?
a track phone.
Can you speak up?
It was a track phone.
Okay, what's a track phone?
Pay-as-you-go phone.
Now, the jury also heard from a fingerprint expert that there were only a few things submitted for fingerprints in this case. Why is that?
We had a meeting with our crime scene and FDLE who processes all that stuff, and we felt our best chance of getting evidence was DNA in this case, not fingerprints.
Did you make contact with Mr. Hartung's employer, G4S?
I did.
And did they provide you with any documentation?
Yes, they did. They provided me with his resignation letter.
No objection.
Judge, at this time, the state would move 370 into evidence. Can you read that for the jurors, please, starting with the date?
It's dated August 21st, 2015 to G4S Secure Solutions USA, 7282 Plantation Road, number 203, Pensacola, Florida, 32503, via hand delivery regarding employment of Donald W. Hartung Sr. To whom it may concern, I, Donald W. Hartung, hereby resign from your employment due to the murder of my family and the necessity for me to handle personal matters. Sincerely, Donald W. Hartung, and has his signature.
When was Donald Hartung actually arrested for these homicides?
October the 27th of 2015.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Deputy Infinger, I'm sorry, Agent Infinger. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to ask you numerous questions, and if I could get started. When were you first aware of the murder on Deerfield Road?
Friday, July 31st.
At what time?
It was sometime around noon, I would say, maybe between 11 and noon.
And what time did you arrive at the crime scene?
I don't recall the exact time I arrived.
Give me an approximation.
Between noon, 1 o'clock maybe.
Okay. And your interview with Mr. Hartung started at what time? Your first interview?
Time, I think the interview started around 1:30 maybe.
So you had been on the crime scene for maybe an hour before you started interviewing Mr. Hartung, is that correct?
Possibly, yes.
And do you always treat the victims of a crime the way you treated Mr. Hartung?
What do you mean victim?
Well, his parents, his mother, and his brothers were killed, so he was a victim of murder.
His family was the victims.
Okay. Well, he's also a victim, isn't he? Don't you consider people that are relatives of people that were murdered victims?
You could, yes.
Okay. And I asked you, do you always treat the victims in that manner?
Not always. It depends on the circumstance.
Okay. In this circumstance, you had been on the case for about an hour and a half when you decided to accuse Mr. Hartung of murdering his family. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What evidence at that point did you have that he had done anything other than being the sole surviving member of a murdered family?
He was the last one to see him alive.
Okay.
The home did not appear to be broke into. The way the bodies were, it didn't look like somebody unknown to them killed them.
Well, let's start with that. First of all, you told him they had all been shot because that's what you believed?
I have been informed that possibly they had been shot, yes.
Okay. So you didn't even know at the point that you decided that he was the suspect that how the people were murdered?
No, I did not.
Let's go on from there. Did he voluntarily go to the sheriff's department with you?
Yes, he did.
Did he at any time ever ask for an attorney?
No.
Did he voluntarily answer all your questions?
Yes.
And that was for both of the interviews, is that correct?
Correct.
And even after you read him his rights, he never asked for an attorney?
No, he didn't.
And on your first interview, he was a suspect, but you didn't read him his rights, is that correct?
No, I read him his rights the first
The very
interview.
first interview?
Yes.
So on both interviews, when you interviewed him, he never asked for an attorney?
No.
Okay. When you went to his house, you searched it, did you not?
Yes.
Okay. Did he interfere with your search of his residence in any way?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. So he was fully cooperative with you?
He cooperated with our request, yes.
And did he ever refuse to answer any questions you asked him?
No.
At any time was he free to leave
Yes.
when you were interviewing him? And he never left?
No.
And he agreed to your, when you made a request for DNA, he agreed to it, didn't he?
Yes.
Now, you offered to give him a polygraph or a lie detector test.
Yes.
And did he agree to do that?
He did.
And did you ever do that?
No, I did not.
Why not?
There was nobody available to give him a polygraph test.
Okay. Now, this was at 1:30 in the afternoon on a Friday when you interviewed him.
Yes.
And because it was a triple homicide, it was pretty much a all hands on deck, is that correct?
Yes,
And you had all the homicide investigators working.
yes,
And although you couldn't find anyone to do the polygraph test at 1:30, you certainly could have had someone called in,
they tried to and couldn't reach them, is what I was told.
okay? Well, you re-interviewed my client at what time?
It was about 1:30 in the morning.
So are you suggesting that for that 12-hour period of time, nobody could find a polygraph examiner?
Yes,
Mr. Hartung was totally cooperative with you, correct?
yes,
And after he left you that evening or that early that morning, did you ever attempt to re-interview him with a polygraph examiner?
no,
And you earlier said that polygraphs are not admissible.
I did.
That's only true if either side objects. That could be consented to, that the results of the polygraph could go into evidence.
Guess it could be.
Okay. When you searched Mr. Hartung's residence, one of the, I believe it was one of the crime scene people said that some suspected blood was found.
Yes,
I think on his shoes and on a carpet and on the floor in his residence.
yes,
Did any of that, quote, suspected blood ever relate to any of the victims of this crime?
no,
Was there anything in Mr. Hartung's home that related to the victims of the crime?
no,
Did you seize knives from his residence?
yes,
And they didn't relate to any of the victims?
no,
Now, at 1:30 in the afternoon, when the bodies were discovered, you said that Mr. Hartung was your suspect. Did you ever look at any other suspects?
we looked at other avenues, but no other suspects were ever developed.
What other avenues did you look at?
We tried to get IP address information from the home, from Cox, but was unable to get that. No evidence that we found or had processed led us to anyone else.
Well, you said that you determined not to do fingerprint testing.
I didn't say we determined not to. I
You
said
did
that.
limited fingerprint?
Correct.
Did I misspeak?
Yes,
Okay, so you did limited fingerprint. Did you go through the house for fingerprints to see if there were any strange fingerprints there that didn't match up to the victims or to Mr. Hartung?
I know the doors and things like that were fingerprinted, and we didn't find anything like that.
How about light switches?
I don't recall that being.
How about thermostats?
I don't recall that either.
How about the kitchen counters or the table surface or any hard surfaces?
It was. I know it was swabbed for DNA.
How about for fingerprints?
I don't believe it was.
There were numerous blank times when you left the room that the video shut off. Or
Yes.
we didn't have the video. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. When you exited the room, did you look into the room to observe Mr. Hartung while he was alone?
Yes, I could see him from where I was talking to other people.
Okay. Could you hear him?
Yes.
And did you see that he was upset? Hear anything he said that he was upset?
No.
Did you hear him say, "I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got my way of handling things. I hold it inside. Did you hear him say that?
Yes.
Were you trying to get Mr. Hartung angry during your investigation?
I was trying to get him to show some type of emotion.
Why? Did you think that was going to make him confess to you?
Just to see if he would react to anything, because he didn't react to his family being killed, so
Well, you don't know that he didn't react. He just didn't externally react.
he
Is
didn't
that correct?
react. He didn't react to me.
He held it in.
Yes.
During all of your interview time with Mr. Hartung, did he consistently deny killing his family?
Yes.
What education do you have about the Wicca religion?
None.
So when you were asking him about the blue moon and you were asking him about cutting up animals and that sort of thing, were you talking about stuff you had heard on just around, or what basis did you have to even ask those questions?
One of the other investigators that went to his house saw the Wicca stuff and Ouija board in his house and looked it up online, and that's where some of those questions came from.
Well, were those, you can look anything up online, right?
Yes,
And some of it's true and some of it's not true, isn't that correct?
I would agree with that.
Did you bother verifying any of the sources?
No, I didn't think it had anything to do, any bearing on the case
Well, if you
later on
didn't-
in the investigation.
If you didn't think it had any bearing on the case, why did you ask it?
I didn't know at that time.
But you subsequently determined that that's not what happened,
Correct.
that none of this Wicca has anything to do with the case.
I couldn't prove that it did.
Well, did you ever investigate through any people who are authorities in religion that any of that was even true?
I asked a Wicca person that I came in contact with about it, and they advised me that that wasn't a Wicca practice.
It was not.
It was not.
When you went, after you left the crime scene initially, the first time you went to the crime scene, did you follow Mr. Hartung home, to his home?
The deputy did, and I did, yes.
Okay. And he went home and he dropped the little dog they called Bear, who was in the house, off, right?
Correct.
And that's the dog that was running through the crime scene.
It was in the crime scene when law enforcement arrived.
Okay. So that dog got dropped off at Mr. Hartung's house.
Yes.
And then, did you go into his home at that time, or did he just immediately get taken to the sheriff's department?
He was taken to the sheriff's office. I didn't go into his house at that point in time.
And again, that was voluntary.
Yes.
And after that interview, did you have the initial interview, did you have Mr. Hartung driven home?
I did.
And did you go to his home at that point?
No.
That afternoon or late evening, did you go back with a search warrant?
Yes, I did.
And that's when you searched his home?
That's when we seized his car, and I asked him to come back down to the sheriff's office. I did not go into his house at that point.
Okay. So you seized his car, and as you answered to Ms. Jensen, nothing was found in the car?
Correct.
And that's when what time was this that he went back down?
It was about 1:30 in the morning on August the 1st.
So you all woke him up and took him back down there?
Yes, sir.
And that was again voluntary? You didn't have a warrant or anything for him?
Correct.
Now, you said numerous times that at the time of the murder, John Smith and Voncile Smith were watching television. How do you know they were watching television?
I can't say for a fact they were watching television, but they were seated in a position to watch television.
Could they have been asleep?
They could have been.
Now, when you arrived at the crime scene, the rear door is how you came in, is that correct?
Yes.
May I approach the clerk for a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going, if I might approach the witness with State's Exhibit 18. Is this the door you entered through?
Yes, it looks like it.
And is that the way it was when you entered the residence?
Yes.
Everything just like that?
As far as I can remember,
Does that door look like it's broken? Or did the door look broken?
no.
And are you aware that the first responders had to break into the house?
I was told they used a credit card to open the door.
Okay. So, would you agree with me then that if they could do it, just about anybody could enter that house through that door using a credit card and not leave any marks?
Yes.
So, you wouldn't have to have forced entry to enter that house. Signs of forced entry.
If they checked the door, maybe not.
If they used a credit card to get in.
You wouldn't see that, no.
Now, when Deputy Smith was the first deputy there, as I understand it, he was the first deputy that testified yesterday. I guess it was yesterday or earlier this week. When Deputy Smith testified, he said that he initially kept a log for the first 3 hours he was there of who came in and who came out. Who kept the log after that of who came in and who came out?
After that, it was pretty much documented by crime scene in their reports. When they
Have you ever
arrived.
seen a log? Crime scene didn't have a log. I asked.
Well, it's logged in their reports, like they say, I arrived at this date and time, that sort of thing. That's how it was logged in their reports.
So there was no formal log kept, is that what you're telling me?
It's a formal report.
Was there anyone keeping track of who went in and who went out?
I don't understand what you're getting at.
Well, for instance, do we know what time the investigators from the coroner's office went in?
No.
Do we know how many went in?
There was 2.
Do we know if they went back?
They were there the initial day, and I believe one of them, I can't remember if one came with Dr. Minyard or not.
Okay. And do we know what time she came in?
Who?
Dr. Minyard.
It was the day after the autopsies were done, I believe.
But we don't know time or anything like that.
No.
When fire rescue arrived, did they go inside initially?
No, it was my understanding that they opened the door and then law enforcement went in.
There's been some question about the thermostat at the house. Do you know if anyone turned the thermostat down or turned it up?
I know it was turned down when we arrived, yes.
Do you know who did that?
I don't.
And do you know what the temperature was at the time they arrived?
I don't recall, no.
And there were more than one thermostats in the house. Do you know which one they turned down?
I believe it was the one somewhere near the kitchen.
Okay. What about the other ones?
Couldn't tell you.
So we don't know that.
No.
And did anyone log in what the temperature was of the residents at the time the law enforcement arrived?
I believe it was documented when crime scene arrived and took a picture of it.
Okay. Have you ever seen that picture?
I have, but I don't remember what it was. I couldn't tell you the degree.
Ma'am?
Yes, you may.
This is offense exhibit number 21,
Yes.
Is that the picture you're talking about?
I don't know if this was the first picture they took or not.
So if that's the only picture I received from crime scene, would it be a fair statement that that is the one they took at the time they arrived?
It could have been taken after they turned it down.
Well, isn't that something that's important?
Yes.
And are you suggesting that we just don't know?
I thought it was warmer than 76, and they turned it down to about 76.
But we don't know, I guess.
Not by that picture, no.
Well, by anything. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude to you, but you were the lead investigator, and you knew you were testifying today, and you've been a law enforcement officer for 16 years?
14.
14 years. And you know that the temperature in a murder scene is important. So did you check anywhere to see what the temperature might have been, or what records there are that are accessible to you or that you brought with you?
I don't remember.
Okay. When you arrived at the scene, were the bodies still in place?
Yes.
Okay. As far as Richard Thomas Smith is concerned, he was in the back room on the floor, and John Smith was on the couch. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Was Richard Smith face down or face up?
I couldn't see because there was clothes on top of him.
So he was covered at the time you arrived?
Yes.
Subsequent,
All three were.
When you went back, had the bodies been removed at that time?
The clothes were off of them.
And was Richard Smith face down or face up?
I believe at that point he was face up when I arrived.
Do you know who turned him over?
I would have been the medical examiner investigators.
Were they there when you were there the second time?
Yes, they were.
What is gunshot residue?
It's particles from the gunpowder and whatever's in the projectile.
Is it a blowback onto a person who fires a firearm?
Yes.
And gunshot residue will let you know if someone has either fired a firearm or been close to someone who's fired a firearm. Is that correct?
It could, yes.
Well, whenever a firearm is fired, there is gunshot residue, correct?
Yes.
Blowback. Did you take any of Mr. Hartung's clothing into evidence to see if there was any gunshot residue on any of his shirts, sweatshirts, anything like that?
No.
As far as Voncile Smith was concerned, were there any signs of torture pertaining to her?
It would depend on what you call torture.
If I might. Hey, do you have his depo? Page 17, line 8. May I approach the witness?
Yes, ma'am.
I took your deposition on June 27th of 2017 and asked you that question.
Yes.
And on page 17 at line 8, would you agree that was the question I asked you?
Yes, I would agree.
And what was your answer?
No.
During the course of crime scenes investigation at the residence, do you know whether or not they changed gloves as they were gathering evidence?
You mean like each piece of evidence?
Yes, sir.
No, I don't.
There was a photograph introduced during the state's case that showed a safe in Richard Smith's room, or a safe that belonged to Richard Smith. Are you familiar with that?
Yes,
And it contained $13,000 plus worth of cash.
something like that, yes.
Were there other safes in the house?
That was the only one that I was aware of.
You weren't aware of any other safes?
Not at that point in time.
Did you subsequently become aware of other safes?
Yes,
And how many other safes did you become aware of?
one.
And where was that?
It was in the floor of the home.
And when did you become aware of that?
In May of 2016.
And how were you made aware of that?
Individual, last name Purifoy.
Okay. But the sheriff's department never found it.
No, we did not ever find that safe when we were processing the scene.
When crime scene investigated the, I guess, the den where Richard Smith and John Smith were found, their bodies were found, there was a projectile found there. You're familiar with that.
Yes,
And could you tell what caliber of gun that came from?
by the weight of the bullet, it was thought around a 9mm.
Okay. When you searched the home of Donald Hartung, you didn't find any 9mm bullets, did you?
No,
I think you found some .22 cartridges,
that's correct.
but nothing that heavy as that particular cartridge was that shot Richard Smith.
No,
Now, Homeland Security was here from about the 1st of August through the 13th of August.
that sounds about right.
Okay. And you met with them, is that correct?
I did.
And you provided them with all the electronics that were taken?
I did.
And did they ever provide you with a report on what they discovered on those electronics?
Yes.
How about any report of their investigation?
No.
So you don't know what their investigation uncovered?
They informed me that they did not uncover anything pertaining to Richard's work that involved these murders.
What was the purpose of them being here?
Because an employee of theirs had been murdered.
And when the cars were searched at the crime scene. There were 2 vehicles there, is that correct?
Yes.
And did you open one of them and then have to get the locksmith to open Richard's?
Yes, we did.
They were searched, correct?
Yes.
And contents were also photographed by either Christine Rollins or Ms. Eliopoulos?
Yes.
Was any money found in either of those cars?
Not that I know of.
Were you ever contacted by a neighbor who told you that there was money in the cars?
It was after the fact.
Did a neighbor contact you and tell you there was money in the cars?
Yes.
And did you discount that because you all searched it and saw that there was no money in the cars?
We no longer had control of that crime scene when this was brought to my attention.
But did the neighbor tell you that the money was in the cars at the time of when you all were over there?
It was my understanding it was after we had left when he saw that.
In which cars did you say the money was in?
It was in the tan SUV. I believe it was a RAV4.
That was one of the ones that you all searched and photographed?
Correct.
And there wasn't any money in it when you all found it or searched it?
Not that I'm aware of.
And you left a deputy at the scene every night, did you not?
Yes, we did.
And did that deputy ever tell you somebody came over and put any money in those vehicles?
No, he didn't.
And who was the neighbor that told you this?
Mr. Chittington?
Now, you asked my client what kind of cigarettes he smoked, and he said 305s, I think?
Yes.
And then he also said sometimes Winston's, and he had tried Cools.
Yes.
Okay. Now, were cigarette butts found at the crime scene?
Yes.
And were they found in the outdoor trash can?
Yes.
And were those cigarette butts collected from the outdoor trash can?
Yes.
And were cigarette butts found on the indoor trash can?
Yes.
And were cigarette butts collected from that trash can?
Yes.
Do you know how many were from the outdoor trash can?
I don't know the exact number.
How about the indoor trash can?
4?
4 from the indoor trash can?
Yes.
Okay. Did you determine whether the cigarettes were 305s or what brand they were?
I don't remember the brand of them.
And no murder weapon was ever found, correct?
No. Besides the hammer that was in the kitchen.
Okay. No, there wasn't one found, or?
Well, there was a hammer found, there was no gun ever found or knife.
Okay. On the hammer, that was found in the kitchen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was it determined to be one of the murder weapons?
Yes.
And how was that matched up?
DNA, and Dr. Minyard observed the hammer and said that it matched some of the blows to the heads of the victims.
She said that the type of hammer matched the blow.
Correct.
Did that specific hammer have blood on it that would match?
It had the DNA of all the individuals in the home on it.
Okay. Everybody's DNA was on it.
Richard's, Voncile's, John's, and Donald's.
Where was Donald Hartung's DNA on it?
I don't know. I just know I was informed by the FDLE lab report that his DNA was on the hammer, that all 4 of them were on the hammer.
Okay. And was any blood found on the hammer that tied that hammer into being a murder weapon?
I believe it was John's blood.
Okay. What about Voncile's blood?
I don't remember if it was on the hammer or not.
How about Richard's blood?
I don't remember it being on there.
And do you know when any of the DNA was put on the hammer?
No.
Now, my understanding is, as far as your crime scene technicians were Ms. Rollins, Ms. Epiopoulos, Mr. Masita, and Sergeant Bjornsky. Is that correct?
Bjornson, yes.
Bjornson, excuse me. Can't read my own handwriting. Were there any other crime scene technicians there?
No.
And there were at least 3 or 4 homicide investigators there, is that right?
Yes.
And in addition to the homicide investigators and the crime scene technicians, how many other police officers were there in and out of the crime scene?
The only time uniform officers went in and out of the crime scene was the initial deputies that went in.
Now, after the search was over and you had done all of the seizing of evidence, go ahead and have your water.
Oh, fine.
After all that was done, it's my understanding that 2 knives were found, one in a couch and one in a chair. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was done by non-law enforcement?
They were located by an ECUA worker when they came to load up a chair or something that was out by the road.
It fell out when they
Correct.
were loading the chair up?
Yes.
And did either of those knives prove to be murder weapons?
No.
When was your crime scene officially closed off?
We got there on the 31st. It was 5 or 7 days after the 31st. I don't remember the exact date.
Okay. Was there also another safe found in the back bedroom closet?
When we were there processing the scene,
At any time?
I think the safe you're referring to was found after we had let go of the scene.
So were there 2 safes that you all missed?
I was only aware of one.
Well, we've got the one that was Richard Smith's that contained the cash. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was the one in his bedroom.
Okay. Then was there was the floor safe that y'all missed.
Right.
And was there another safe that y'all missed?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. There was a black, I think it's a Swiss Army case that's also been referred to as a notebook that belonged to Richard Smith. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I think it had his wallet in it and some identification and some letters and that sort of thing.
Had his checkbook in there.
Had his checkbook in there, I think a cash card, or you know which one I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Where was that found?
In the kitchen next to the sink.
Okay. Do you know where he kept it when he came home?
No.
Now, who was the other officer with you on the second video?
Sergeant Kevin Coxwell.
Sergeant Coxwell said to my client during that second interview that he could prove my client was at his mother's residence after 5:30 or 6 o'clock based upon a GPS reading. Could y'all ever prove that?
We couldn't prove or disprove it.
You couldn't prove he was there, correct? By any GPS?
What he was talking about was cell phone records, and it didn't show, the towers were too close together. We couldn't show, well, where the suspect lived and where the incident occurred was so close together, we couldn't tell based on the information where he was, if he was at home or there.
In other words, he couldn't prove it.
Correct.
Oh. You said, or maybe it was Sergeant Coxwell, that there were some hand towels in a washing machine at the Smith residence.
Yes.
Was there any blood on those hand towels from Voncile Smith, Richard Smith, or John Smith?
No.
Was there any DNA on those hand towels from my client?
No.
You looked at my client's hands, and that was to look to see if he had any defensive wounds from fighting with John? Is that what the reason of that was?
Any type of injuries on his
Did he
hands?
have any?
No.
So there were no injuries to his hands at all?
Not that I saw.
There were drains that were seized by crime scene. Did you have those inspected for blood?
Yes.
And what was the results?
None.
No blood?
Correct.
What, other than the chair where Voncile Smith was sitting and the area right around that chair, the drag marks on the floor, and the area where you found Richard Smith and John Smith, what other blood was found? Any blood found anywhere else?
Not that I can recall.
You seem to have some trouble believing my client when he said his brother John worked at the Walmart over on Mobile Highway. Why was that?
I think there was some confusion with the investigators that were trying to find that information. May have went to the wrong Walmart is where that came in.
But there was no indication that my client misled you in any way, was there?
No.
Just 1 second, Your Honor. Were the DHS investigators at Mr. Hartung's home?
At what time?
when you searched it?
The search warrant at his house?
Yes, sir.
Yes, they were.
And did they seize any items?
No,
Did you, and we already talked about the items you seized, none of it tied into the murders in any way, correct?
correct.
And when were the DHS investigators at the crime scene on Deerfield Road?
Would have been August the 1st?
Did they go back more times than once?
Yes.
What other times did they go back?
I can't recall every single day that they went. It was only a couple of times. Anytime they went, they were never alone, and they were with us.
Us being someone
Sheriff's office.
Someone from the sheriff's office?
Correct.
But you don't have a record of when?
No.
Thank you, sir. I don't have anything further.
All right, we're going to take a 15-minute break. We'll be in recess until 3:35.